Hey guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Unmasking. This is our second guest that we had on today in the anxiety series. And I just really enjoyed this talk. We met Ashley in graduate school, and it's just been a really cool experience to see her become a mother and really hone her craft and get involved in a lot of the organizations, which she's going to talk about on this episode. Sarah, what were your thoughts about today?
Oh, well, I just loved having Ashley on. It was so great
Yeah.
because our series is on anxiety. She was very open in grad school about her struggles with anxiety. And so I loved how, she's kind of evolved over the years to share her experience with that and how it has changed for her and how it has impacted motherhood for her and the way that she parents her own children. And then just the support that she provides. Working with children as a child therapist myself, that's the population I just love to work with, and she does too. So I loved getting her take on, how she supports children and adolescents with her own experience,
Hmm.
because I think, it's so crucial to get in there when they're young to kind of help, break up some of those neural nets and help children, be a little more resilient as they get older,
Yeah.
and to be able to understand their feelings in a healthier way. So I really just appreciated her sharing her story, because it's not, a she has a very traumatic story that she
Hmm.
shared of things that she has been through that most people will never experience. So
Yeah.
I loved that she was so vulnerable and open with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. The two words I think that come up for me are empowerment and activism. You know, how she's taken
Yes.
her story and she's empowering other parents and other people to, understand themselves and understand their children differently. But then also, like, what do we do now? Where do we go from
Mhm.
here? And I think that's where her activism work comes in. And I'm not going to spoil it because you have to listen to find out what she does now. But we were just so
Mhm.
honored to have her on and just so grateful. So please
Yes.
enjoy this episode with our dear friend, Ashley.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Unmasking with Cindy and Sarah. We are so excited because one of our favorite people, Ashley Igo, is here. She is going to be sharing her story with us and talking about her relationship with anxiety and trauma and panic, all of the things. So, Ashley is a colleague of ours as well. We met in grad school. I like to call her my emotional support person in grad school. We actually took every single class. When I first met her, we were at our pony day interviewing. She was so lovely and introduced herself to me. And then I just did not let her leave my side. So we registered for every single class together. We took every class together. We went to Taos together. All three of us were in Taos. We
Yeah.
Hmm.
studied there on a trip. We have been there when our children, we didn't have children. Cindy had little children.
Hmm.
Now Cindy has children out of the home or about to be. Ashley has two beautiful children. And then I have my Olivia. And so we've all just been through different life stages. It's been 10 years now. So we are
Can't
just
believe
happy
it.
to have her here. So this is our second episode in our series on anxiety. And we first just want to hear from you, Ashley, a little bit. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, where people can find you, and then just go into a little bit of your history.
Yes. Okay. That's a large question. I will start
It is.
again.
It is.
Well, first of all, well, thank y'all for having me, first of all.
Of
Ultimately, first of all.
course.
So I am a licensed professional counselor, as you guys are too. And then I also have a registered play therapy license. So I am at East Dallas Counseling, and have been there since I graduated graduate school. So it's been a long time now, which is really amazing and crazy at the same time. So kind of going back, I mean, this is you kind of want me to talk about like why I'm a therapist, right? And
Hmm.
Yes.
okay, so
How you got
looking
into
back,
counseling, all of
yeah,
that beautiful
so
stuff.
looking back at my life, it's been tumultuous, to put it lightly. So I'm originally from Mississippi. Kind of grew up northern Mississippi, Memphis area. I'm an only child. My mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 4. And so I kind of had, even a toddlerhood was just kind of not typical. And in 1999, I was in a train accident. My best friends and my mom, the moms were best friends too. And we all were coming back from Chicago to a trip from the American Girl store, and an 18-wheeler tried to beat the crossing arm, and we were on the sleeper car and kind of the front of the train, and the train derailed. And so I lost my right foot in the accident, and then everyone that I was with in my sleeper car died. So my mom, my 2 best friends, and my cousin passed away as well. So that was kind of a gut punch to the childhood, as you can imagine. So yeah, and fast forwarding, through the years a little bit, my dad remarried when I was 12, which was rough. It's not even a great time. Sorry for anyone who hasn't had a traumatic incident, but that was interesting to say the least. And then kind of going through high school, went to SMU for undergrad, and then again in grad school. I met my husband in college, which was awesome. We got married in 2013. We just celebrated 11 years, which is crazy.
Wow.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. I always say I was a child bride, but So after college, I would have said okay, or in college even, I was like, I want to help people. Like, I always had this heart for nonprofits or doing things that were more altruistic than getting a business degree, which my husband has a business degree. It's amazing. I totally love that. But I can take one look at a math class and say, I am out. Thank you. So I knew I always wanted to help people. So I worked in the nonprofit sector for a little bit after undergrad and did not love sitting in a cube all day. So I started looking into things that, okay, how can I help someone, but also have a professional career? And counseling just seemed like something that was it called to me. And it was something that I knew that I should have gotten more when I was younger. So went to grad school with you guys starting in 2014, and really wanted to focus on kids and adolescents because there was an inkling in my brain of if I had had the right intervention as a kid, would I still have these same struggles today? And so my focus really that I wanted to do was more on early intervention and children and teaching them just psychoeducation on this is how your body feels when you have anxiety or when you have, an adjustment issue or sensory issue or whatever. How can we work with you while you're younger so that it doesn't balloon into something huge when you're an adult? So that's kind of how I got to my career path in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize the trauma that you had even before the accident. I had forgotten that your mom had been sick. So for you already had come into having, some traumatic experience and anxiety there with your mom. What were some of your memories with that played into your anxiety?
So of course I wasn't aware of it at the time, but as a 4-year-old, but I remember my mom being really sick in the bed, and my dad would say she can't come out of bed today. She's feeling really tired. And I remember going in her room and just seeing her sleeping and just being okay, well, it was because she was doing radiation and chemo. And then she had to go away for several weeks. And I remember it just being my dad, and my aunt came to help take care of me. And while she was in Boston and doing this homeopathic kind of hippy dippy cancer treatment. And so looking back, it's oh, those were those experiences that were atypical, but really kind of formed oh, I need to worry about my parents being alive. So yeah, I mean that, very early memories, but definitely still significant. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Ashley. I'm curious, just looking back, knowing what we know now about how it shows up in different life stages. When you look back at your formative years, kind of or maybe even adolescence, right? What were some of the ways that it presented itself, the anxiety piece?
Yeah, it was there. and this is something I tell my parents that I work with is like, oh man, that thing that you think is just silly, like that it could be really significant. So my dad used to say, Ashley, you just have squirrels in your head. Like you just have squirrels in your head. Like he would just kind of make light of it and make a joke. But like looking back, I mean, I had OCD tendencies. I had compulsions. Like I was the just right kid. You know, OCD is usually like a number thing, like have to do something a certain amount of times, or it has to be just right. I was a just right kid. So like I would have to tap things a certain amount of times or till it felt right. So tapping things a certain amount of times, and constantly checking things. Like I was constantly checking doors, constantly checking the fireplace, making sure the gas was turned off. Like that is not typical behavior for like a 9-year-old, right? I was a clock watcher, had a lot of trouble falling asleep. I would worry that my dad, like we didn't have cell phones back then, right? But if he didn't answer the phone at his office, then I was like, okay, he died. Like I'm an only child. So it was very much present, but my dad, it was the early 2000s. Like he had not been educated. He took me to a therapy session one time and it was not a play therapist. And so I was like, no, thanks. I'm not talking to this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those symptoms were definitely there, but we didn't have a name for them, right? It was just squirrels in your head, where it was actually like, no, this is a traumatic response and it's anxiety. And I mean, I come by it honestly. Everyone in my family on my dad's side has anxiety. Like we used to joke at holidays. It's like, all right, who has Lexapro? Let's pass it around.
Yeah.
Everyone took the same. Even my 90-plus-year-old granddad, we all took the same milligrams of Lexapro. But so I come by it honestly. I just had this giant environmental light switch that turned on with my mom's cancer and the train wreck, and it was just like, okay, here is this dump, and my dad didn't know what to do with it. So
Well, yeah, and it sounds too like I think a lot of parents don't realize that their children you're trying to find ways to control it. So when we say like the OCD tendencies, it's like, well, you can control that. Like that's something you have the control over, but you can't control your mom's illness or you can't control this. And then I imagine on top of that, your mom did get in remission and she was doing well. And then you were like, oh, mom's okay.
She's
we're
gonna
having
live.
this fun experience. Probably a time where like you were actually like joyful, like we're at the American Girl store. I'm with people I love. I'm going home. And it just like your whole world just changed completely overnight. Like talk about trauma. I mean, I think that's as big as trauma as you can get. And so walk us through kind of that experience for you, if you don't mind, from when that happened. And then did you see more of an increase in panic after that? Like what were the symptoms after kind of that situation?
Yeah, thankfully, and I can kind of talk about this, I didn't start having panic attacks until grad school. Lucky me. Right when I was, being evaluated and looked through a two-way glass. That was fun. So essentially this era, like after the accident, I had this like resilience that was expected of me. And then I like totally bought into the Kool-Aid of like, oh, it's going to be great. You're going to be totally fine. Like we're going to move on. And my dad very much had that attitude because he didn't know what to do with feelings. I would always say like, oh, I don't really cry. Like, I don't really cry. I didn't do physical therapy. I just like taught myself how to walk again. Like I had this attitude of like, I'm okay. Like I'm going to be fine. Look, I'm going to put my leg on and I'm going to learn how to walk and run. And so that was like the story, the narrative of my childhood was like, oh, look, like, she can still play volleyball and do tennis and all these things. And so I was like, okay, self-fulfilling prophecy, like I'm going to do that. And so those compulsions and OCD things, they were still there, but I hid them really well most of the time. And they were just kind of dormant. Like I always say, like, but what was happening is that my brain, as you guys know, like trauma lives in the right hemisphere of the brain. And so the neuroclusters of trauma that I experienced at 8 were just set in, and then my brain developed around them. And so it was like this sleeping dragon for over a decade that was like just coming out in little spurts of things. So it would have like maybe an anxiety attack here and there, but nothing that was like full blown panic until I got to grad school, which honestly is a gracious, like, I really do like thank the Lord for that, because if I had had panic attacks and debilitating symptoms when I was with my dad and stepmom, they would not have known what to do with that. Like
Mhm.
that would like not be a thing. And my dad and I actually talked about that. It's like, man, I'm so glad this wasn't a thing when I was growing up in your house, because you wouldn't have known what to do. And he was like, you're right.
Yeah.
So yeah, essentially, I started having just horrible, horrible, debilitating panic attacks in grad school for like no reason. I remember I'd watched like a 10-year anniversary video of the train wreck, like some news coverage, and the imagery kind of triggered my brain to be like, "Oh, that was really horrible. You were in that." And I just never really done that before, as far as just like looking back at it and focusing on it. And so I started to have panic attacks getting on planes where I was enclosed in a metal space. Like I would like hyperventilate, feel like I couldn't breathe. I dissociate during panic attacks. So like, it's like I'm outside of my body and I am like, what's a dream? What's reality? What's happening? And then I have to work on grounding myself. But when all of these things were happening, I had no idea why, because in the left hemisphere of my brain, I was fine. Like, I'm fine. I'm like married and have a graduate degree. I'm like working on what's going on here. Everything's okay. Like, but the right hemisphere of my brain was so disintegrated. And so, The Body Keeps the Score. I know everyone loves that book, but it was really informative for me. It's like, oh, my body held on to that experience, even though I had not fully processed it. And like, I thought just talking about things was all fine. So yeah, I mean, just to keep it short, like had to do EMDR therapy, which was life-changing for me, and did, some more talk therapy, but EMDR was really, talk therapy was not sufficient. It was necessary, but not sufficient. So I did EMDR, I did talk therapy. I started taking just a small dose of medication that changed my life, literally. I still, it's not, the goal is not to just numb you out to all feelings, but it's to keep the snowball from going down the hill, which it has done that. And so, yeah, I realized like, okay, in grad school, I was like, I have to help myself before I can be a therapist and help other people. And so I think the Lord was like, you can't go any further. So you got to stop and take care of your body, and then we can move on with this. And so it literally stopped me in my tracks, and I had to get help with it.
I was just thinking about this as kind of, you said the sleeping dragon. And I think that's so interesting how powerful the mind can protect and function and keep you pressing forward. And look, I can achieve these things and I can follow the rules and you can tell me what to do. But when it comes to a vulnerable situation, and you'd reference the two-way mirror. And so for our listeners that aren't sure what that is, in graduate school, we have to do so many hours where we are being observed on our clinical skills. And there is a two-way mirror. And so we know that people are watching us. And so I was just thinking, as you said that, Ashley, yeah, how vulnerable, how like that is an instance where your brain and your body were like, whoa, I have no control over this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that happened in grad school,
right?
Where we had precious Misty Salt, who was like,
I know, I love her.
Versus like being in, with an actual client now, but it's given me so much empathy, because I see so many girls with panic attacks now, and I'm like, I got you. I know exactly, like, I can just be like, I know exactly how this feels. And we talk about our experiences together, and they're like, yeah, you're right. So it's a bonding thing now.
Sure.
Like, well, unpleasant at the time, but a lot of empathy was, I can really empathize with people who have panic attacks.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I remember in grad school, you and I were driving in the car. And I remember you were like, Sarah, I dissociated. Like like we had that conversation, and you were walking me through. And I remember when you were like, telling me, you're starting to see a therapist. And that really pushed me also to like get into therapy, Ashley, because like Cindy said too, like we were under a microscope, and I think we all want to help other people. That was the common denominator there. But it really, if we were all in it like we were, and we were all vulnerable, and we were all wanting to be as authentic, we can't help somebody else until we have worked through the things that we need to work through.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's that countertransference, and that's where we take on, something from someone else, or they remind us of a parent, and then we're
Yep.
bringing that into the session, and we don't want to do that.
Yep.
And so I think the great thing about the program at SMU and the professors is it was such a safe space to be so vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
with with the cohort and the teachers that we had, that we almost had to present. We all had to look at ourselves. I shouldn't say present, but we all had to look at ourselves under this lens and really see like, hey, I'm not a perfect human. Like, there are all
Right.
these things here. I have to unmask, which is what you were
There
masking
you
for so
go.
long.
I was.
You were
Yeah.
totally, when you said that, I was like, and I think a lot of us do that, is we mask to get through it. And you had a lot of protective factors there too. But
Mm-hmm.
also, you were an only child. That's a lot of pressure in itself, being an only child, because
Mm-hmm.
there's no one else your parents are looking at. So you already were like growing up under that lens of like, okay, I'm going to do all the right things. I'm going to be this. Then you had these traumas presented, but you wanted to be strong for your parents. And then you go through this other huge traumatic event, and you're like, I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to do all this. So, and it's almost like you were in survival mode for all of those years. And then when you finally got to grad school and you were kind of looking at all this, I think it's like your body just went, okay, here we are. Here's all this stuff.
Yep. And
Let's
thankfully,
just lay it all out.
right. One of the first things you do in EMDR therapy is you establish your resources. And I was like, oh, that's so significant, because once I started having, like I said, it's like such a grace that I had panic attacks when I was out of my dad's house and I was married and had like an amazing husband and his family's amazing. Like, I had so many more resources that could help me process things. And so it was a much safer situation for my brain. And so, yeah, like the body protects itself. And then it's like, okay, I'm done. Like, you have to deal with this now. But the resourcing is so important. Like, yeah, so that's one of the reasons I just love having therapeutic interventions that are throughout the lifespan of, like, see some kids at like 4 and then they come back to me at 7 and then 10, because they have me when things present at different stages of life, because they will. And it's just really, it's so interesting.
So interesting. You talked about the resourcing, and I am an EMDR therapist, and so I know what that is. But for our listeners, can you give an example of like what resourcing would look like with anxiety?
Yeah. So specific to my EMDR, like, okay, what if once we do this EMDR therapy, essentially, like once we start this process, it could bring up, XYZ. For me, it was like very vivid imagery. I would have crazy dreams, or like some people have like visceral body reactions. Like some people look at like a rash. Like, there's EMDR is amazingly powerful, but I always say it's intense. So do it when you have the resources that can support you while you do it. But yeah, it was like, okay, in this situation, what's your resource? So like my number one resource is like always my husband, like calling him. So if I would be in a situation, I remember I was in Target and I was like having a flashback to something my mom wore one time because of something I saw at Target. And I was like, okay, I'm having a panic. And so I had to call Brooks, and we were like, okay, let's talk about like something you can see, something you can feel, like doing all of the grounding exercises for panic. Yeah. But you have to have that resource. Otherwise, I'm in Target by myself having a meltdown.
Yeah.
But, without any resources. So, yeah, like that's just an example that that is just specific to me. But everyone establishes their own resources through that modalities. But it's essential. You can't just, I was like, okay, let's go into EMDR. Let's do like 6 sessions and I'll be done. Like, I was very much like let's be done with this. I don't like this. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But my therapist was like, no, we have to do like 3 or 4 sessions on resourcing. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So not the most patient, but yeah, definitely necessary and has been really helpful.
Yeah. So a lot of imagery, just, using your senses, because we know that when trauma revisits, that's some of the first things that go offline, are our ability to feel anchored or grounded. Yeah.
Very crazy.
Yeah.
And are you trained in that, Ashley? Like, do you do that with your play clients, or is that just something? Okay.
I don't. I thought about it, but I'm worried about some countertransference there, honestly. So maybe it's something that I look at down the road, but right now my big gun that I bring out for my clients is my therapy dog,
I
Bosco.
love it. I love
So
it.
yeah, he's my biggest, I say my biggest tool. Kids come to the office to see him mostly. I'm like the second best, which is great.
Animals are very just amazing, and
Yeah.
they just love you unconditionally. And I think
Yeah.
they can be therapeutic in themselves. I mean, hello, emotional support animals. Although
Right.
I will say the airlines, it's getting a little crazy out
It's
there with
getting
what
hot. I
people,
know. You would
I
know.
mean,
Josh, I'm sure has some stories.
yes,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah, I also wanted to ask if you could share with us, like, what do you see in your own practice with trauma dissociation? Like, what are some of the symptoms that people can look out for with children? And then what were some that you experienced as a child that now you know that's what it was, versus like when you really were more cognizant of like, that's what's happening to me?
Mhm. So within my practice, I mean, most of my clients right now are preteen to teenage girls, mostly because I started seeing them when they were 7 and now they're older. So I would say, how this plays out now is mostly through my teenage girls telling me about experiences, right? Of like,
Hmm.
okay, I am in my classroom, I'm starting to dissociate. And so we have like resources and tools. Okay, what are you going to do in that moment, right? And so we build their skills over time. So a lot of it is educating parents. Like if you see your kid at the dinner table, and like I have one girl who it's like picking is a thing, or like pulling hair, or just completely dissociating from reality and getting on her phone. Those are very, very common. So I would just say it looks different in
Okay.
every age, right? So in my brain
Hmm.
right now, it's how are teenagers or preteens, how are they disconnecting in the moment, which is so hard because now everyone's disconnected with their
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
phones and with all the things. And so I just say pay really close attention to that. Like, are they kind of sinking into the background? Are they potentially dissociating? And then I educate my clients on that, of like, because maybe they're feeling it, but they don't know how to label it. And so they talk about, I had this weird experience in math, or this weird experience in English. And it's like, oh, that's a dissociation. And that's what your body's doing to kind of protect itself and turn offline. And so let's talk about how to walk through that and how to come out of it. And so it looks more like that for me versus like when I was younger and had 0 words to put to it. I don't so much remember the dissociation, maybe because I was dissociated, but mine again was more so the compulsions and the
Yeah.
like searching for control, which is more
Mhm.
age typical. So like kids who just have to have control and are super rigid and need predictability. Like if you change something about their day and they just completely lose it, like picking them up from school early stresses them out because they're waiting in the lobby, that kind of thing. That to me, for parents, I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Like that is
Mhm.
something that could be a major, symptom of something major going on. Right. And so again, like that's why our training is so great through the stages of development with play
Mhm.
therapy, of like, okay, this is what these things can look like at certain ages, and even defiant behavior. Like, oh, they're just being so manipulative and defiant. Like, no, they're demand avoidant because they're really stressed out in that situation.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so here's how you can handle that. So really equipping parents is also kind of a big passion of mine, because again, like you don't want to love you Max, but squirrels in your head is not a great way to label that for your child.
Thanks for sharing that. And speaking of the
Mhm.
parenting piece, I'm wondering if you could also talk a little bit about how this has shown up maybe in your own parenting, or what has your parenting experience been like? Because I can imagine having gone through what you went through and then now having the language to put around that. And then now
Mm-hmm.
you have 2 beautiful young children. And then you're like, okay, well, now I really don't have a lot of control. I mean, we do to a certain degree, right? But there's nothing like
I
a
don't
healthy
know.
dose of parenting that's going
No.
to really wake you up to the
And you
fact
do
that, yeah,
I know. And
God,
your kids really are like she has the cutest kids.
I
They are the
mean,
cutest little,
the
like she and her
cutest.
husband each like copied and repeated themselves. Like their
Correct.
kids are like the cutest little.
Which is great for Brooks, and Lord help us for me.
Hey, I
So
have one over
June,
here. It's like it's
God,
yeah. Those
So
girls will get
June,
you. It's never the boys. I don't know why people
no,
said boys are harder. I'm like, have you had
no,
have you had
the
a girl?
girls. And
Yeah.
have you parented yourself?
Have you
I always
parented
say, like,
yourself?
my
Yes.
dad and my mom are looking down on me like, what the heck, Ashley? Now
Mm-hmm.
you get to raise yourself. Like, it is
Yeah.
very humbling raising yourself. My sweet, beautiful 3.5-year-old daughter who thinks she's Princess Elsa one moment and then is naked in the yard with the pig, acting like Mowgli the next. So
I
A
love
it's
real
it.
like
pig, a
the
real pig,
literal real
friends.
pig. She's like, I mean, it's like the Jungle Book around here. Anyways, it's very humbling in short. So yeah, and that's the thing is I know the things to say and I know the things to
Mm-hmm.
do. And I am generally pretty good at it. And it's really empowering to be like, ha, this is so actually helpful. Like our training is amazing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm, with that said, as your question of like how the lens of your background raising kids, first of all, I'm always scared that they're going to like develop something that I have, right? I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, did you have OCD? No, every 3-year-old looks like they have OCD. Okay. Like when she's like, has
Normal.
things very specific, I'm like, okay, did she touch things? Okay. No, she didn't touch it 5 times. Like we're good. So
Yeah.
I'm a little hypersensitive to that, but I get, my husband is like type B 1000, like has a resting pulse of 42, like is half. And so we're really glad for that because he's a great balance out of me. But I am so much more in tune with like, oh, she's having a meltdown, but that's not on purpose. That's because her brain is dysregulated and she needs me for co-regulation. And I am that thermostat, not the thermometer, as we all learned.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like, where my dad, again, love him, but like he would have looked at me and said, stop crying. What's wrong? Like,
Yeah.
get it. You're fine. Versus like, oh, that was really, really upsetting. I'm going to sit with you for a moment. You can feel however you want, act however you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't get a license to behave however you want because you're sad that Elsa's hair is not braided, but you can feel really sad about that. And it's just been so great to see like, okay, this kid has a lot of my genetics, obviously, but man, I am so excited to see how she grows up differently because I am wired differently now and she's therefore going to be wired differently. And so I can see maybe how, like, I want to be what I didn't have for them. And I say June, I'm focused on June because Oliver's 11 months old and is just like a fat Michelin happy baby right now. So he's less so on the discipline and to teach things, but yeah, it's, it's really humbling and encouraging at the same time. And just like seeing like, man, she is me. And so if I had been raised, not that I'm a perfect parent, but I do have amazing skills based on what I do. And so it's really empowering. And I love equipping other parents that way so that they can hopefully be encouraged when they're raising their little tiny teenagers too.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's rewarding because in a way you're healing yourself through parenting your child.
Yeah.
That's what I have found because I had to really look at it. Just brings up things that you didn't even know bothered you about your own childhood or that you hadn't worked through yet.
Yep.
And then you see these like little beautiful babies, these children, and you just think, how can you not nurture their emotion? How can you not? And especially if you're a highly sensitive person too, like you really want them to be able to express their feelings instead of thinking like, oh, I'm too sensitive, I'm too this, let's shut it down. Because in our world, I feel like everybody wants the child who's going to be a leader and that's going to question things and do that. But really, they want you to just sit quiet in class and follow all of the rules. And that's not realistic. We're all different. We're all unique. We all have different kinds of brains. Cindy always says this to me, Ashley. She's like, Sarah, you are ahead of the game because you had your child after grad school and you had all of these resources. And yes, I am not a perfect parent either, but I will tell you, I know how to repair. And that is the biggest thing I never got growing up is like a repair from my parents on them having an adult meltdown because they were having a rough day. So I think the fact is like parents out there, we're all gonna yell. I have yelled, we all get upset, but it's the repair that matters because your children have to learn how to repair in relationships. That's so important.
We do it every day.
Yeah,
rupture and repair. Like
Yep.
Gary Landreth says, it's not what you do, it's what you do after what you did.
Yes.
I love that man.
Love that man.
Love that.
But yeah,
Protect
like to
that
your
man.
point of like like healing through parenting, like June spilled this like giant thing of water the other day, and like in my head in that moment I saw like my dad would have been like oh my God, freak out.
Mhm.
And so it's like that was playing in my head, and then I'm like, no, I get to rewrite history. And it's okay, sometimes things spill.
Spills
And
happen.
she was more frustrated about it
Yes.
than I was. And she has some of that rigidity. And I was like, it's okay, June. Things are going to spill and it's okay.
Mhm.
And so I'm getting to teach her that, like, she may be wired to be rigid like I was, but getting to teach her, like, things happen and you can still be accepted for that and we move on is, like, really empowering as a parent. So,
Mhm.
to your
Yeah.
point.
I love that example. I love that example. That's beautiful. I think
Yeah.
some of the things are about your story that into like your resiliency now, right? Because
Mhm.
that doesn't always roll out that way of I held this kind of sleeping monster for so long and then was able to seek EMDR, right,
Mhm.
primarily to heal. When you look back, right, like what would you point to as like this was a role and this played a role
Yeah.
and that? Yeah.
I've thought about resiliency a lot. I mean, I love the word, I love the concept because I think sometimes now, a lot of things I hear from parents are like, kids just aren't resilient anymore. Like
Mm.
people are too in tune with feelings. I'm like, okay, we can be both. Like we can be in tune with
Mhm.
feelings and teach resilience. And well, first of all, I really truly believe that like when we did the family genogram in family of origin, remember in grad school,
Yes.
Oh,
where
yes.
we learned about themes and difficulties that our family has experienced. And I fully believe that like I get my resiliency from my mom. Like she was, I think it's in my genes, right? So
Mhm.
it's a huge blessing there of like, okay, my mom was super resilient. I mean, she had a kid at 16. She was one of 8 kids in this like Mississippi town on a farm. Very like didn't go to college. I'm the first person on my mom's side of the family to go to college, much less grad school. She was in horribly abusive relationships, got out of them, married my dad. So like
Mhm.
looking at her life, wow, like such resilience. And
Mhm.
I don't think that I'm just like oh, amazingly resilient for out of nothing. Like I think she passed that on to me, which
Mhm.
is a genetic blessing. But I also think that resilience and community and therapy and my faith that is most important to me, like those are all just have been surrounding constants in my life that have supported me in that resiliency and propped me up and encouraged and um being an anxious person versus a depressed person. Like I always say, like people who are anxious are like worried they're going to die, right? Versus like the depressive is kind of like the opposite. And so
Mhm.
I think just naturally being an anxious person has helped me want to be resilient in a
Yeah.
way.
Good
I always
point.
say, give me the anxiety all day, right? Versus the depression. They're both horrible and debilitating in
Mhm.
their own rights. But I feel like I was given these chances and these opportunities to be able to use my story and encourage
Mhm.
others, and I've just taken them, and it's been a huge grace. Like I don't think that like, oh, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps by any means. I've been supported and loved and had the resources to get to where I am. I'm still work in progress. It's not like I've made it to the top here. Like I
Sure.
still have struggles. I still
Yeah.
have a panic attack here and there, but I just have been encouraged and supported. And I think genetically and environmentally, it's really propped me up to be resilient.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And to add on to that, you found an organization, and I'd love to hear the story of how you came into this, the Lauren Kennedy Scruggs Foundation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You tell us a little bit about your history with that, how you found it, what you do now with it, why it's so important in your life.
Yeah. So, Lawrence Ruggs Kennedy Foundation is a foundation where we essentially cover for prostheses what insurance doesn't. And so, and for that it's a cosmetic covering that helps your prosthesis look real. So I met Lauren, who's actually from the Dallas area. She now lives out in LA. And then Lisa Curley Lauren connected me to Lisa. We're all amputees from traumatic injury, and we all are very blessed and have great insurance that covers prostheses. And we were able to pay for the cosmetic covering, which again is not covered by insurance. Insurance covers a metal pole. Like if you see, just literally a metal pole walking around, that's it. That's all you get. And for an arm, if you need a prosthetic arm, you have to apply for an average of like 3 or 4 times to get anything covered, because it's not considered a necessity to have an arm. It is a luxury. Yeah.
My goodness. Are you kidding me?
Do better.
It's so bad. Yep. It's not necessary.
I had no clue.
Yeah. As a leg person, it is necessary to walk on a prosthesis, obviously.
Correct.
So yeah, the beautiful cosmetic coverings that are custom painted and molded to match your sound leg, like an arm, those are luxuries. And so we, through our foundation, we pay for that piece for girls and women. We've started, when Lisa and I were talking, it's been 10 years. We started in 2010. I started with them in 2014. And so we're about to give another arm away next month to a lady who, she's had the same arm since the 90s.
Wow.
And so, it's crazy. So we're getting to pay for her to have a beautiful new prosthesis. And then in tandem with that organization is the Beautifully Flawed Foundation, which is Bethany Hamilton, the former pro surfer, Soul Surfer, the movie, that's
yes.
She's a good friend. And we host a retreat every year for girls and women out in California, and it's all amputees. And so the Lawrence Kennedy Foundation and Beautifully Flawed, we work together. We have lots of overlap with the girls that we've served. But what a place. Talk about resilience and healing and just being with people who have like circumstances. And the retreat it's my favorite thing of the year. I mean, it's so healing. So it's life-changing for these girls and women. So those are my 2 babies.
I love it.
Rescue.
I know. I was just going to say, if you know Ashley, she has the biggest heart for rescuing animals. How many have you actually fostered? How many?
We're on our 52nd foster dog.
Oh my gosh.
I love it. Yes.
Poor Brooks. He did not have any animals growing up. And I was like, well, I'm going to change that.
I mean, but you know what I love about it is how I know we talk about it, but just it's so beautiful how animals can heal as well.
Yeah.
And you have given, 50, you have had, I know you've adopted some along the way, but you also have found many homes for them. So like Ashley always says, adopt, don't shop, don't shop. She will find you. She will find you whatever she will find you whatever kind of animal you need to rescue. Dogs especially. I already have her radar looking for my daughter wants a really cute little dog, not a puppy though. I can't deal with that. So but I remember in grad school when you started going to Beautifully Flawed. I think that was the first year, right? In 2014. Yes. And that was before all of y'all had kids. And now I see your kids coming.
Yes.
It's really
my
cool.
kids go. Bethany has 4 kids now. Like, I know we always joke we need like a nanny for all the children now, but it's such a beautiful way, like to see, and for these girls, because their age is like 13 to 26, like seeing like, well, you're an amputee and you got married and you have a kid or kids and you can do all these things, like just being an example and just being there. Like we learn that therapy is like all about just being with the be with attitudes and like just being with people who have like experiences where you don't really even have to talk. But you just feel that experience of like, wow, this person is just like me and they have shown resilience, right? And they can move on, but also be sad and process, but also be strong and weak at the same time. Like it's so beautiful to do that. And it's really cool now to go as a therapist, because now I kind of get to be like, if anyone needs therapy, let me help you find a therapist. And I've helped so many girls throughout the years find help in their states because they come from all over the country and the world. And it's been really empowering to get to do that. But yeah, it's super healing, and dogs are obviously a piece of that in my life, and just getting to bring my rescue dogs to therapy sessions with kids, and like this dog had a really tough life, and she's missing half her tongue, and but look, she's now trained and loves and accepts people, and that's Winnie. She's retired now. Now I bring the corgi, but yeah, cool depictions of brokenness to restoration and rupture and repair, and all the things that you were saying, Sarah, of like we get to learn to do things that maybe we didn't experience when we were younger, and it's healing.
It is. It is. Yeah. And we appreciate you so much coming on and sharing and being so vulnerable with us. It's crazy to see how much we've all grown. As therapists, I always say, like, your therapist needs to have a therapist too. I know we all see therapists, we all work through things, and we believe in it. And it really, when you said that about your mom was just resilient, I think of Jane Fonda. She had talked about her life and the resiliency that she had versus her brother. And that she said, I just believe you're innately born with that. And I think that also goes into who can break a generational cycle and who cannot. And now you're helping your own child through your own resiliency and your knowledge to have a higher emotional IQ and understanding of herself, where she's not holding those things in. And then it comes out, in compulsions or, anxious symptoms or things like that. We're all going to have the anxiety. We all have it as a protective factor, but it's how you cope with it. So I love that you shared, like, hey, I still have these experiences. I'm a human, but you now just have more of the resources of like how you cope with it. Like you call your husband, you ground yourself, and then of course, like repairing all of the different things you do, with your child. So, I mean, you are just an amazing person, Ashley. We are just, your story has stuck with me since I met you. You're just an awesome human, like that does a lot of really cool stuff. And I think you give a lot of people hope. And I think you have turned a really horrible situation in a way to help others. And we just appreciate you so much coming on the podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Yes. We are fun. I know. We're going to put all of your information on the podcast, and we will have your organizations also. I just want to say, guys, these are beautiful prosthetics. Like you can get your nails painted. I remember like you can get it matches your skin, everything. It's like insane. Like really you would never know. Cool. You can get a tattoo if you want. All of it. It's really awesome. So we will link all of these. If any, we would love for people to come on and support Ashley and her cause for these women who have been through some really rough situations to help them. But we just appreciate you so much, Ashley.
We do. Thank you, Ashley.
And our listeners. I know. We'll have to get together for lunch soon.
Let's do it.
Get all the
you can bring your kids to my farm. Y'all can all come.
Olivia would love it.
And then when you leave, you take a dog with you.
Olivia can't take the pig.
Yeah, we cannot. No,
but we'll need a dolly for that, so we can arrange that. You can borrow Peppa.
Yes, Peppa. I love it. Oh my gosh!
I love
and
it.
Can
so
you just
cute.
Before we wrap, can you share? And we'll link all of this, but can you share with our listeners where all they can find you or your animals?
Well, so I'm at East Dallas Counseling for my therapeutic services. LSKfoundation.com is our nonprofit, and then beautifullyflawedfoundation.com also. And then for, if you want to have some good in your life and get a foster dog, Dallas Animal Services is 150% capacity at all times. So They always need people. Yeah, they're euthanizing for space, and we always need people to foster and adopt. And I always say, sorry, Brooks, but I will watch your foster dog when you go out of town. So that is no excuse. I can do it. We can handle 7. It's totally fine. I got you.
You're like, I got this.
Thanks,
Gives
guys.
me anxiety.
I know.
Appreciate you, Ashley. Thank you again for coming on and giving us your time and sharing your story with us. It was
welcome.
Truly so nice. Thank you.
Thanks for all y'all are doing. I love it.
Thank you. We appreciate your support, and we just thank you so much. All right, listeners, we will be back next week with another episode. Please enjoy this episode with our lovely friend Ashley, and reach out if you have any questions.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.